Not if you can hear me. Oh, wait, you haven't been added yet.
Oh,
There you are.
hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, first off, do you mind if I record this? I guess you're already recording it anyway.
Either way, yeah, that's fine. And both sides should record it anyway, just redundancy, because I
Yep.
can't tell you how many times someone on the other side has said, "Oh crap, it didn't work. Can we do this again?" It's like, yeah, okay. Anyway.
Yep. But fantastic. Are you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Hell yeah. Okay. So first off, can you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Mark Sargent. I live up near Seattle, Washington, and I am a flat earth advocate, although I've been called a lot of other things as well.
What got you into flat Earth?
Conspiracy boredom. More than anything. 12 years ago, I thought I ran out of conspiracies. I never got married or had kids, so I had a lot of free time on my hands and went down just about every conspiracy rabbit hole you could think of, except for flat Earth, because flat Earth is super, super dumb. And then I decided to look into it. The summer of 2014, 9 months later, the beginning of 2015, I made a series of videos, put them out on the internet with all my contact information, which is a great thing to do. And here we are 11 years later.
Yeah. So I'm mostly just going to be asking you questions about the theory, because
Sure.
I'm really curious about it. It's weirdly hard to find a good source with a lot of information about the specifics, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess first off, can you give a general overview? Because I know there are a few different flat Earth theories.
Yeah. Let me grab the model. 1 second.
Awesome.
All right, here's the model.
Ooh.
All right, so what you are looking at is sort of a snow globe type of thing. So if you go into anywhere in Google and type in ancient cosmologies, you will see something like this. Every culture ever drew the same thing, mostly because of the stars curved overhead. So the flat Earth model, more or less, looks exactly like the UN flag. By the way, literally, you could overlay it. So all the continents basically look the same. You know, Africa, South America, Australia, and so on. The only continent that doesn't look the same is Antarctica, which normally would be, you know, like Australia covered in snow at the bottom. But in this case, Antarctica is a massive continent that surrounds the entire outside. And then the whole thing is covered in a lovely dome that is made out of who knows what. Heavy element, heavy water, unified field, some sort of high frequency field, whatever, but we can't bust through it. We've tried in the 1950s and early 1960s, couldn't. And so here we are. But that's generally what it looks like.
Okay.
Oh, and it's not floating in space, and I know you have a lot of follow-up questions, nor did we build it. We had nothing to do with the building of this place. This isn't exactly like the Truman Show from 1998 with Jim Carrey. This was built by either a civilization much older and more powerful than ourselves or some sort of divine being. But at that point, you're kind of splitting hairs anyway.
Mm-hmm. So is what we think of as Antarctica, is that an ice wall? Because I've read about that a fair amount.
Well, ice wall is the easiest way that media has jumped on it because, well, it's a wall of ice that's, you know, I mean, at the coastline, yeah. I mean, you can look up all sorts of pictures on the Antarctic coastline, which is, you know, some sort of ice wall, not like a Game of Thrones ice wall. I mean, it's a couple hundred feet high. But there are some beaches you can access, you know, some rocky beaches, but most of it is some sort of, you know, frozen ice wall-ish thing. But the real barrier is the interior. I mean, the white parts you're looking at here are thousands of miles inland. And in my opinion, they're probably even more white than this. We just kind of made it, you know, just so it fit in the dome really nicely. But I believe the white areas are even bigger than this because our United States Navy was looking for the edge for 30 years, from the late 1920s to the late 1950s. And a lot of other things, a couple other things about the Antarctic, which most people don't know. It is the highest continent, even by mainstream sciences terms, in the world, which is the average height, I think, is around 14,000 feet. Well, you know, altitude sickness kicks in at about 7,000 feet. So 14,000 feet, that's way up there, way higher than anything. Now, it doesn't have mountains like necessarily like Mount Everest, but I mean, the whole place is basically a mountain range, which one of the follow-up questions might be like, how's the water not fall off? Well, you've got a continent around the outside that's 2 miles high minimum, then no, the water's not going anywhere. You're basically living in a giant lake, a giant studio, a giant terrarium, planetarium, soundstage.
What do you think is past the Antarctica?
Well, you're going to get to that question right away. I consider it to be, what's outside of this world, more or less. I consider it to be the opposite of what's in this world. So if this world is 99.9% conflict, meaning it doesn't matter how beautiful, how powerful, how talented, how rich you are, you always have something to complain about, always, right? Which seems odd. You'd think, that happiness, they say that happiness is not something to be chased, it's something to be discovered. Well, people aren't going to generally find it anyway. But I think the whole universe kind of runs, not the universe but the universe where there's a whole bunch of these things, runs on dualism, which is whatever's inside here, this conflict-ridden world, the opposite is true outside. If you want to call it heaven or Shambhala or Nirvana, whatever it is, there's 5 major religions in the world. I think they all hold a piece to the puzzle, but that's what I think it is. I think it's cyclical. We go back and forth between the two. And if you want to delve into more of that, that's fine. But I know we have time constraints. So.
Well, you mentioned the universe being a lot of flat planes like that.
Sure.
Do you think they're laid out in a sort of space feels like too easy of a term, but like, do you think they are in the same sort of realm?
Well, yeah, I do. I've always been a believer of that what's outside this place, and I'm not trying to steal from the comedian Bill Hicks, but this place is really just kind of it's part classroom, part amusement park, which is if you have one of these in the middle of an infinite realm where you can do anything. Think about this. Again, since we're going down this road, why not? Let's talk philosophy for a second, which is if you had a genie and the genie gave you 3 wishes or you know what, forget the 3 wishes. You know what you're going to do. You're going to vote. You're going to ask for 1,000,000 wishes, right? Nobody makes it to 1,000,000 wishes, by the way. You wish for all sorts of stuff, right? Tons and tons of stuff. And then finally, one of the epiphanies I had years ago was I firmly believe part of this universe runs off of novelty, which is without novelty, human beings especially, we run out. We go stark raving mad without novelty. We can't be stagnant. Hence the term "what's new?" The standard greeting. So if you wished for everything, I don't care how many years it takes, 500, 1,000, 5,000, you're gonna run out of ideas eventually, right? Like no different than walking into a library. And you read all the books, they're all gone eventually. And then what do you got? And then you go to the genie, it's like, man, I got nothing left. What do I do? Right? And the genie says, well, there's this place I could send you to. It's horrible. It is 99% conflict. You're only going to be there like 100 years max. And you're going to be suffering most of the time. There's some fun times, sure, but most of the time, it's going to be a pain in the ass. And it's like, wow, why would I ever want to go there? It's like, well, because when you're done there, when you come back here, it's going to be great. You're going to love it all over again. It's going to be fantastic. And it's like, wow, it sucks. And yet it sounds enticing. What's the catch? Because there's always a catch, right? And the genie goes, well, the catch is you're not even going to remember this conversation. And he snaps his fingers and voila, you wind up in a place like this, which answers one of the age-old religious questions or the conflicts, which is people say, the first thing I'm going to do when I see God is I'm going to ask them, why do you let bad things happen to good people? Well, the answer is, well, what are you talking about? You volunteered for this place. That solves the whole thing. If you volunteered, you weren't, but what I'm basically saying is you weren't forced into this place. You asked to be here. And when you get out of here, then it's the only time you'll appreciate it. After you're out, you're like, oh, now I get it. Kind of no different really than a roller coaster, which is why I use the amusement park ride. Again, I'm not stealing from Bill Hicks when I say that. the roller coaster, analogy is, there's twists and turns and everything, but when do you feel the best? Well, when the roller coaster's over. The roller coaster is scary as hell, but the point of the roller coaster is when you're done, you survived it. Your physical instincts, it's like, oh, you think you're going to die the entire time, but at the end, you survive it. And that's the payoff. Anyway, there you go. That's my little nickel tour.
That's really interesting. I had not heard that before.
I'd be surprised if you did. I have never. I came up with it partially after looking at something called the Masonic tracing boards. I'm not a Mason, and I don't. In fact, I believe there's only 5 of them, and I firmly believe it describes part of how you get in here. And one of the tracing boards looks like an amusement park entrance into some sort of ride. I'm not kidding you. When you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, yeah, exactly. There's a guy at the beginning who lets you in the first gate, and then you weave around this long thing, and you get to the final door, and there's another guy that lets you finally into whatever it is. And it's in the middle of this paradise, absolute paradise. This building, for some reason, is the middle. Most Masons, I guarantee you, 99% of Masons have no idea what they're looking at when they stand. Because I played games for a living, when I was growing up, that's how I started out in software. Was a game tester and a game player, and then finally a game producer. When I saw that, yeah, it made total sense. And the voluntary aspect really kicked in too. When you go to an amusement park, nobody forces you on. I mean, yeah, there's peer pressure from your friends. You get on the ride, you pussy, right? But no one forces you to get on the ride. And you have every chance in the world to turn around, and that lets everyone off the hook. So anyway, sorry, I ramble.
You're good. Yeah, that's what we're here for. I want to hear the rambles.
Okay.
So you mentioned earlier that we don't exactly know what the sky is or what the dome surrounding the Earth is. So what, in that case, what do you think the sun is?
Oh, the sun is just part. Okay. When I say I was part of the software world, I'll use some software terms, but I'll make it easy. Which is when we build the sky in any sort of simulation, it's you can look it up. It's called the skybox system, because computers can't draw curves. Pixels are square. Everything you see in software and television, there's a reason why it's called pixels. Pixels, little square, or rectangle, or whatever you want to look at. But it's always right angles. And so when we build the skies, you can see wonderful planets and everything. In our simulations, they look like spheres, but they're all just made up of tiny, tiny, tiny little squares and right angles. And hence, because of that, the whole sky itself is basically just a box on top of a box. All simulations are made. I mean, of course, they're 2-dimensional with a 3-dimensional illusion built into them, but they are all, everything is squared off. So when it comes to the sun and the moon and the stars and the shooting stars and everything, you are basically looking at a highly decorated clock system that predates language. That's all it is. You are looking at the ceiling of a planetarium. And I know that dates me. You've probably never been to a planetarium. It's old school. but if you went, I encourage people to go, you sit on your back, and people used to smoke a lot of dope and watch laser shows on the weekends, because the planetariums didn't get a lot of traction even back in the day. So you're looking on the ceiling, and it's like, oh, hey, there's Jupiter, right? And you can see can you see the moons of Jupiter on the ceiling of a planetarium? Yes, you can. Can you land on it? No, you can't. Why? Well, because it's just lights on a freaking ceiling. All right. Who's to say when you don't walk out of that planetarium, you're just not in a much, much bigger planetarium? And that was the opening. I don't know if you ever watched the Netflix documentary, but that was the opening of the thing that we did, which was, look, you're living in all the world's a stage, and we are just players in it. Literally, I don't think Shakespeare knew, but he probably had some insights. He probably just didn't know how to explain it. Now we have the tech to explain it. So the sun is just a big incandescent light bulb. The moon, by the way, you can look up videos on this. I didn't come up with this, is a cool laser light that generates a cold laser light independently from the sun. It's not reflecting anything, up to 13 degrees Fahrenheit. Coolness, meaning it's warmer in the moon shade than in the moonlight. The exact opposite from the sun, which shouldn't be the case. It's colder in the shade than in the sunlight. In the moonlight, it's at the exact opposite. If the moon was reflecting the sun's rays, it would it'd be way, way reduced, of course. It's because of a reflective surface. but it'd be neutral. It'd never go negative, especially not negative third to double digits. Never, ever, ever. And does that prove that we're in a flat world, soundstage? No, but it destroys the relationship between the sun and the moon and puts a whole lot of other things into question. So short answer, lights on a ceiling. That's all it is, which would probably lead into another thing. It's like, well, does that mean that they're all faking the space programs? Ooh, yeah.
I was going to ask you about what you thought about the Artemis launch earlier this
Oh
week.
my God. Okay. Well, no, there's been, in fact, I talked to a British newspaper yesterday, they called, because we're getting a lot more traction recently because of Artemis. One, you got to remember, the only reason Artemis, and I called it last year, I said this year, 2026, again, I'm older, so I remember you only live through two centennials in our country, because they happen every 50 years. You only get two of them. But I was there for the 1976 one, and it was a big deal. So I knew when this one was coming up, it's like, oh no, we're going to the moon in 2026. Doesn't matter how they try to fake it, they're going, because this is that year. It's the same reason why we did Venezuela and Ecuador and Iran and all the other crap that we're doing right now. It is an America 250, strength, might makes right, all that crap. That, that's all that's happening now. Everything is tied to this year. Our country is so tied to numerology in one way or the other. So Artemis, I knew when they were on the Time magazine cover, and you probably missed it. That was done months ago. It's like, as soon as they made Time magazine, oh yeah, we're absolutely going. They may add some drama to it. It's like, okay, there's some weather issues. Don't get me started on that. And we'll put it back in the garage. Well, let's pull it back out, and then we'll launch. But they're using the same tricks that they've used for the last 15 years, and never addressing the core problems that even plagued Apollo, which was, what shielding are you using to go against the Van Allen radiation belts? The only things that can stop radiation are lead and gold and water, which we use for power plants, none of which you want to use in aircraft in any capacity because they're so damn heavy and they throw the aerodynamics off. Other things would be the craft, if it's made out of aluminum or some sort of lightweight alloy, how is it not exploding in the pressure of a vacuum? Everything in a vacuum explodes. That's why we make submarines as thick as they are, to counteract. And granted, the pressure is coming from the outside, but it's why we don't make submarines out of aluminum, because they would be crushed before they even hit 300 feet. In fact, a submarine in a vacuum chamber would work great because they're made out of heavy steel. That's the whole point of the submarine, right? It's really, and even then, 1,000 feet, they have problems. So you put a submarine in a vacuum chamber, you put a submarine in space, it'd probably hold up pretty well. So if that's what it takes to hold up in space, what's the capsule made out of that's doing that? And an extension of that would be the spacesuit. I put a spacesuit challenge out there, years ago. And I said, the spacesuit doesn't work. Everything in a vacuum chamber that's pressurized, especially if it's soft, expands until it becomes like a snare drum, and then it explodes. What magical thing, and no troll has ever emailed me in a decade, and what magical thing in the backpack of the Apollo astronauts counteracted the pressure difference of the vacuum of space? Tell me what happened there. Tell me what happens. And they can't. And if the spacesuit is wrong, if the spacesuit is absolutely flawed, and that was my challenge, I said, put me in a freaking spacesuit in a university vacuum chamber, anywhere. Loan me a freaking spacesuit. Put me in there and pull the switch and tell me how I don't die. No one has even tried. And one more extension to that would be the atmosphere, which is, if pressure cannot, this is physics, right? Pressure cannot exist next to non-pressure without a vacuum, without some sort of barrier, right? What's the barrier of our world? There isn't one. So how is our atmosphere sitting right next to a vacuum and our atmosphere is still here? And even if you could say, I'm not going to grab the globe right now, but let's just pretend I have a globe right here. Theoretically, if the globe was sitting without a solar system, not moving at all, potentially, yes, the vacuum would eventually stretch everything out and the atmosphere might hold on. But we're not sitting still. We're moving in incredible speeds in all directions. Not only are we spinning 1,000 miles an hour, which creates centrifugal force at the equator. Even forget about that. That's nominal by comparison. We're traveling horizontally 60,000 miles an hour. And then we're also traveling vertically with a solar system supposedly 500,000 miles an hour, in inconceivable speed. We can't even, it's tough for us to even measure a speed like that. How is our atmosphere still here? So short answer to your Artemis problem. Oh no, we had debunked that way before it even launched. We were just waiting for the glitches. You know, it's like, okay, you're going to have to do some sort, and they gave us the absolute bare minimum, which was the interior crew shots. We're just waiting for the glitches. That one of the core issues that NASA has started badly and it's going to end badly is that you have to do it live. And if you know anything about media, you don't do it live. You don't do anything live. Hell, they even rehearse the Academy Awards for a damn good reason, because as things get screwed up live and you just have to wing it. Stage plays, fine. You have to do that, but stage plays deal with errors. NASA has always tried to do things live. They always create errors. And what it showed me, what Artemis, and I'm going to be doing a live stream actually tomorrow for the reentry with somebody. I don't know. We're just going to do it last minute. You know, spend 30 minutes making fun of it on the way down. But what it showed me more than anything, remember, they didn't land on the moon. 54 years after we had landed on the moon, supposedly in 1972, 54 years is so long in space terms. They just do a slingshot around the moon. Really? That's all you've got to show for NASA after 54 years of conquering the moon is just one lap. What they showed me in this was they will never, you can quote me on this, they will never, ever be able to fake walking on the moon again. Our detection of the internet is way too microscoped. Everyone would stare at every freaking frame in high def. You will never be able to do what you did in 1969, because in 1969, there were only 3 television stations. There was no internet. Even TV wasn't even close to where it is now. So yeah, Artemis, this is just what we did for America 250, and they're going to kick the can down the road, and no one's ever, who knows what's going to happen at the end of this year anyway. I still think there's going to be some sort of, the war is going to spread into other things, but another topic for another time. There's my rant.
That was interesting. With the moon being a laser, what causes the cycles? Is it just like it changes frequency over time or something?
You mean the moon generating a cold light?
The like how it waxes and wanes over the course of
oh no, that's no different. That's just part of the skybox system.
Okay.
So what, again, you can go into a planetarium and like, okay, set moon to waxing, and it'll do it for you. The only thing it couldn't do, because we just didn't have the tech, was we couldn't create a sun in a planetarium, because we can get closer with OLED technology, but it's really tough to generate that sort of lumens. We mostly have to do night stuff. But yeah, when it comes to the moon, that's just software. By the way, I am still a huge believer of this place is tied to a simulation in some way. If you want any proof of that, look up something called, if you haven't seen it yet, the red laser DMT. That's all you have to type into YouTube, and you will find it. Fascinating. I only found out about this like last year, where some guy, again, leave it to the drug crowd, where he took a red laser and widened the beam and put it on like a white wall. And then one of his friends who was on DMT just like, what is happening? And he walks up to the wall and he could see behind it. Now, you can't see it on camera, nor can you record it, which is why it's brilliant. But every single person they put on DMT said the same thing. They walked up to this wall and they're like, they can see the matrix code. It's in red because the beam is red. Who knows, if it was a green beam. I don't know if they tried it in different colored beams, but they can see behind the wall. They can see the makeup of this place, which makes sense. I mean, the double slit experiment alone screams that this place is some sort of simulation, because we use that in our own software, and which was talked about in stuff like the movie The Matrix from 27 years ago and the movie The 13th Floor from 28 years ago.
Kind of going the opposite direction from the sun and moon and all that.
Yeah.
What do you think is below the ground? Like obviously like dirt and rocks and stuff, but if we were to theoretically dig all the way down, what do you think?
That is a wonderful question, and that's usually one of our push questions, because mainstream science, even though you got to read the fine print on this, say that if you dug 4,000 miles down, you would hit the center of the earth, right? That's funny, because the deepest, and if you see the cross sections of the world, it's always this red and orange and yellow and white white center. The deepest hole ever drilled is like, it's like, wow, how do you guys know that? And each one of those bands is like perfectly 1,000 miles thick. It's like, well, that's awfully convenient. How deep have you dug? Half that, 2,000 miles, 1,000, 100, 10. Deepest hole is 8 miles. Germans and the Russians worked to try to break the 8-mile barrier for years, freaking years, could not get past it. So do we know what's below? You know, of course, this model's thick only because, you know, we got to put the battery and the tech in it. But if 8 miles is the deepest you can go, I mean, this thing might only be 50 miles thick. Doesn't really matter because no one's going there. So and you can look. By the way, you can look this up in Wiki in the fine print as far as, you know, the how, you know, how the layers are set up. They'll tell you. In fact, they used to do it in the science books. But I will say we have no idea what's going down there, onto there. We're just extrapolating from volcanoes, right? But science doesn't like doing that. Science, in fact, what science should have done is they should have just showed a globe with a big question mark in the middle of it. But they don't like doing that. They like putting their stamp on things and saying, this is what it is. We're confident about it, until they're absolutely wrong. And then they just change it without any apology. That's one of my beefs with science. It's like, oh, no. It used to be this. No, now this is what it is. And we're 100% confident about that. Really? Are you? Because you were wrong. In fact, I'll give you one really quick. One of my favorite of all, look it up if you get a chance, the coelacanth fish. It's an old school one. Coelacanth. Ugly prehistoric fish with a whole bunch of extra fins, sharp teeth. And this thing has been extinct for 70 million years. How do we know? Because we had the fossil records, and the carbon dating said 70 million years. That thing on the wall there, 70. Every single scientist in the world was on board with this. Yep, that fish is part of the prehistoric era. And then they found one swimming, caught in a net by the British Navy off of South Africa in 1940. And no scientist would believe it. Oh, they obviously screwed up. It's like, well, it was the Navy. It wasn't drunk fishermen. It was the Navy. Well, then they found one off of Mozambique and then one off of Madagascar. And pretty soon they figured out Africa is just teeming with these things. They're all over the place, to where science finally had to come back and say, well, it's a living fossil and it's in an evolutionary state of stasis. And they're just making up terms. The point is, like, what's the point? The point was that science was absolutely, positively put in a certificate you can frame wrong about it, until, you know, and then they had to change their tune after the fact. Look it up if you get a chance. It's fun. So I was just like, Mark, what's your point? My point is, when somebody asks me about like the Loch Ness monster, right? And they say, is Loch Ness, you know, are there potential dinosaurs swimming around the lakes of Scotland, right? And it's like, no. Well, why not? Well, because they're extinct. Really? They're like been extinct for like 100 million years. Like, oh, you mean like that fish over there? So you were wrong about that fish. You're pretty sure, though. You're pretty solid that there's no dinosaurs that could hide from anyone in the murky depths of a Scotland lake. And they don't want to deal with it because it addresses some big questions, like, what has it been doing for 100 million years? See, it unravels a lot of stuff, which is, it's not the fact that the fish or the dinosaur exists or not. What puts into question is the carbon dating system, which is like, okay, is it really 100 million years, or is it something else? And you guys are just making it up because you don't have any good stuff. Look up carbon dating conspiracies if you get a chance. You'll have fun.
Well, you mentioned volcanoes, which is going to get me into the last part of what I have here, which is just deep diving into a bunch of phenomena that I haven't really been able to find answers for with flat Earth. Yeah. So I guess we can start with volcanoes. How do those happen with flat Earth?
For me, again, there's only so much I can theorize on. It's speculation, of course, and I talked about it in the clues, which was, can volcanoes be done artificially from an engineering standpoint? Sure. Not ours, of course. We can melt metal all day long. We can melt rocks all day long. I mean, it's what cars are made out of, and our mining, we've got a massive mining industry that uses some of those techniques. However, doing molten rock on a massive scale is beyond us though. Not beyond whoever built this place. You know, if you have the ability to create something on this scale, engineering wise, with an underwater conveyor system and the jet stream and all the other fun stuff, then creating, and the tectonic, by the way, I don't know if that was one of your questions, the tectonic plates, which, by the way, work way better on this than it does on a globe, because then you're dealing with a flat surface. Then some sort of molten system that's below the surface to keep, maybe, again, just theorizing here, to keep people from digging too far down. Could it be put into place? Yeah, sure. So short answer, I think it's artificial. I know you probably aren't going to like that answer, and a lot of people on the internet didn't, but I'm not afraid to say it, which is like, look, it's got to be artificial like anything else. If the whole terrarium, here's the second part of the argument. If the whole terrarium is artificial, then why would you leave anything organic to it? Why would anything be, just organic? You wouldn't. It would all be tied. It'd all be manufactured in some way, shape, or form. Something is running the underwater conveyor system. Something akin to gravity is working. Now, gravity, again, something we can't reproduce artificially. The best scientists in the world, and I know I'm off on a tangent here, but bear with me for a second, which is because people say, well, what do you think about gravity? Your best scientist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, the most popular media scientist in the world, and there's only 3 of them. He said, we can't tell you what gravity is. We don't know. We can't tell you what it is. We can only tell you what it does. We can only tell you the symptoms of gravity, right? You drop something, it falls. That appears to be something like gravity. But for us, it's some sort of magical molecular force that pulls things down to the center of a ball. I say it's a magical molecular force that pulls things down to, this. And part of the physics engine. Because once, in fact, I was lucky enough when I got into the gaming world, when the first physics engines were built, people were like, oh, it's great for games. It's like, wow, dude, it is way better for other things because it explains a lot. Physics engine basically means physics can be whatever you want. If you're the admin, you can make gravity anything you want. If you want to make exceptions to gravity, you can as well. Certain aspects of gravity can affect the tides, but bumblebees can still fly. Even though, again, aerodynamically, scientists can't tell you why. Sorry, I know you started off with lava and I ended with bumblebees, but...
That's what happens.
Yeah.
The next thing I was going to ask was about earthquakes, but I think you kind of already answered that by talking about tectonics.
Well, I mean, the tectonic plates, yeah. The more detail you add to a place like this, the more conflict, like tectonic plates. The fact that the Earth is actually in conflict with itself, with these plates that are, bending and warping ever so slowly, but when they finally pop, when you finally get a little jolt, it creates these massive earthquakes that can decimate regions or create tidal waves. Fukushima being a great example, and that wasn't even that big. That was an underwater quake. But it's all part of the artificial system. It's all part of a world that is in constant conflict. In fact, up until you had mentioned it, and up until I was thinking about it just now, the plates, everything would be in conflict, including, if you're building this artificially, why would you have just one thing? Why not just have a piece of, basically underneath the water, a big jigsaw puzzle that's constantly in motion? Very, very, very slow motion, but it builds up pressure. Genius. Whoever came up with this model, genius.
How, moving away from like ground stuff, I guess, how do seasons work in the flat Earth model?
Sure. Seasons, when it comes to seasons, are the adding and removing of energy in any particular area. So I'll start with seasons aren't just because of the sun. In this case, remember, the sun is super, super small. In fact, you can't even really see it on this model. The sun would be less than 100 miles wide. Is it generating a whole bunch of energy? Yes. But it's also, and heat, sure. But it's also not traveling on the same path every freaking day. I know you're young, but like a needle on a record player, the needle doesn't go in the exact same track every time. It goes in and out depending on where it is in the song. But in something like this, it also wouldn't be the only source of energy transfer. The jet stream, which I had learned so much in the last 10 years after delving into this, because I had to answer a lot of questions. The jet stream, which I always thought, because I would do plane travel, it's like, well, jet stream's only like 100 miles an hour. No, jet stream's up to like 300 plus miles an hour in some areas. There are planes that literally, well, figuratively, can break the speed of sound without breaking the speed of sound because the tailwind is so great. That conducts a lot of energy. And in my opinion, the biggest source of energy would be the underwater conveyor system, if you ever want to look that up, which is how the currents move around this world, in the water. Matt, between those three things, the seasons are super, super easy to do. Well, you know what? I take that back. Not super easy to do, but easier and makes more sense than the very slight tilt of a globe from a light source that's 93 million miles away. And when we're talking about a slight tilt, we're talking about 0.00001% of a distance change when it comes to facing the sun. And I know people, the scientists, is like, wow, we're in this perfect, so fragile Goldilocks zone. It's like, yeah, our version's easier to understand.
Somewhat similarly, how in close to the poles and like Greenland and all that,
Yep.
typically their days can last for months at a time. The sun's up for months, it's down for months.
Yep.
How does that happen?
24-hour sun in the center, which would be the North Pole would be the center of this thing. 24-hour sun in the center, very easy to do because you can do it with one light source, not hard at all. I imagine just a light. I'm not going to be able to do it holding it with one hand, but you know what I mean. However, 24-hour sun, the weakness of this model, only because we don't understand it yet, the weakness has always been, and I've said for 11 years now, has been the Antarctic sun, because you can't do a 24-hour sun in Antarctica with just one light source or whatever light source you're going to do. I've theorized that there's been, again, if you're doing it with software, you can do it, but it's always worked out naturally. And I think it's also part of the system because Antarctica has always been the least desirable place to go in the world for various reasons. In fact, I believe it's deliberate in that they create so many layers of negative reinforcement. Remember, there's only like 5,000 people, mostly military, on Antarctica at any given time. That's a whole continent, right? 5,000 people. Well, think about going to Antarctica back in the old days when you only had wooden ships and stuff like that. The water would get colder and colder. Finally, you'd see icebergs. People would turn around. It's like, oh, no, icebergs is a terrible idea. You don't want to go there. And then you get to the wall, 200 feet of ice, which is daunting in itself. But even when you get on top of it, there's no food. There's no resources. You got to melt snow for water. There's no indigenous population. There's some penguins, I suppose, you could eat here and there. And then the whole place slopes up to 14,000 feet on the average. The place just screams go away. So as far as the Antarctic sun goes, it was always a push. And so it was like, it didn't really matter to me when it came to the Antarctic sun, which is why when the whole TFE Antarctic expedition thing happened last year, I didn't go. I turned it down. I was like, it doesn't make any damn difference because 99% of the people that get into our community don't get in because of the sun in any capacity, not just the Antarctic sun, any sun. They don't care about the sky for the most part. They care about the horizon. In fact, I would gather 3/4 of the people that get in our community is just long distance photography over water, which is weird because I didn't come up with it.
I guess you've kind of already answered this a bit, but
What?
Why is the equator warmer than near the poles? There's kind of that ring of warmer area going around.
Same sort of deal. The sun would travel across that area more often than others. Mm-hmm. However, the equator has always been interesting for me because also don't forget that this place was designed to be the illusion of a globe. And mankind, I firmly believe mankind, even though there are some people that say, oh, we came up with the globe idea. It's like this place was always supposed to be the illusion of globe, hence the illusion of space and the illusion of the solar system for that matter. So the bigger thing about the equator for me was, think about this. So don't worry about the sun when it comes to the equator. Worry about the water, because if we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, I'm not going to grab the globe behind me, but you'll get this. If the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, as you know, water is extremely susceptible to motion. Right? You hold a cup of water in your car and make a hard left-hand turn. Watch what happens. There's a reason why there's cups on coffee. The little tops on coffee. Why isn't the water at the equator pooled up like the rings of Saturn? meaning this is apparently the only liquid planet in the solar system, and I know I'm saying the word solar system, and you'll get this. But the rings of Saturn, centrifugal force created those rings, right? That are around Saturn, and it's one very specific area around the equator. Why isn't that happening with us with water? Meaning there should be no land at our equator at all. The centrifugal force should have pulled some of the water. In fact, there should be bald spots on the top and bottom of our world. But who cares? Fine, if it's uniform, we'll just go with it. But at the bare minimum, there should be a huge bulge of water around the center of of our equator. There should be no land terrain at all. It should be this weird artificial thing, looking thing of water. And it's not even close. So why not? No one wants. Again, centrifugal force is easy to understand. People do it all the time. A merry-go-round, right? Stand in the middle of the merry-go-round. You're just spinning, but very, very slowly. On the edge of the merry-go-round, you're hanging on for dear life. That's what the water should be doing, but it's not. There you go.
Makes sense. And I have one more thing, which this one's a bit more nitty gritty.
Fine.
Have you heard of Foucault's pendulum?
Or Foucault's pendulum, either way.
Yeah.
Either you could pronounce it either way, I think. Yes, I have, as a matter of fact. And does that prove some sort of motion? No. I don't have any videos on my channel, but I firmly believe that the mechanism involved when you first start out the pendulum, ultimately, when it first kicks off, ultimately creates a bias on the pendulum itself. Meaning, it's always going to there's going to be some sort of motion to it. Could there be something else acting on the pendulum? Don't know. Foucault pendulum. You know what? Because of you, I will call the second most vulnerable thing to flat Earth Foucault's pendulum. However, am I going to lose any sleep over it? Nope. And by the way, I am not shy about saying I don't know. For the most part, Foucault's pendulum, because most people don't understand it anyway, it's a push because very, very few times does it come up. The average person on the street doesn't know, had never seen a Foucault, or maybe they have walked into whatever science museum and they've seen it, but they don't particularly know why. Could be something artificial? Could there be something built into this model that's actually helping do it? Yeah, possibly. Remember, they're supposed to create an illusion of the globe. However, let me throw one more thing in here. Even though there are plot holes in the flat Earth model, and of course there are, we haven't solved everything. If we did, I wouldn't be talking right now. I'd be on the cover of Time magazine. But there are way more holes in the globe solar system model. Way more. Which is why, and I know it's kind of a cop-out when I say that this model is easier to understand than the solar system model. Because the solar system model requires calculus and quantum mechanics and string theory and all sorts of stuff that, even physicists will tell you. It's like, yeah, ask some guy that specializes in dark matter. Have him see if he can boil it down to you in 60 seconds. He can't. We basically took this massive universe and cranked it down to a studio apartment. Does that make it right? And because I know one of your answers, things like, hey, well, just because it's easy doesn't mean it's right. Like, no, but people are funny about easy things. They tend to be drawn to them. Hence, texting. Right? Phone conversations are way more efficient, but texting, it's easier emotionally. It's easier to deal with. So what I've done when I talk to anyone in the science community, I go, until you find a way to explain the solar system as easy as this, we're just going to keep gaining ground. We're just going to keep gaining traction, which is why, again, 11 years later, it's, you can't escape flat Earth in any platform. And why that shouldn't be possible, right? Because everybody knows flat Earth is silly.
Well, that is everything I had. Is there anything else you want to add on to anything you've been saying?
Yeah, nothing long. Just that whatever I've been, everything I've been telling you, take it with a grain of salt, right? I'm just a guy that's pushing a belief that I latched onto and tried to disprove. Our T-shirts read, I got into flat Earth because I tried to disprove it. Don't believe anything I said. Do your own research. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but figure it out for yourself. One of the drawbacks of doing what I do is I don't get to see the pained moments when whoever I'm talking to is working on their computer trying to be like, oh, okay, this will crush flat Earth. Well, okay, maybe this will crush it, and they just keep working through. I was that guy. I worked on this for so long. And I had so much time. Never got married, had kids, so I had so much time to do it. And finally, I just gave up. And I said, okay, I'm going to go the other direction. The internet's as a hive mind, super. They don't miss anything. Someone in the internet will show me exactly where I went wrong, and they never did. And nobody in mainstream science did, and nobody in the media did. So what are we talking about here? I'm still a big believer of that is all done for a reason, that you're here for a reason, that this world was put here deliberately for you, that you're not this tiny little rock flying through space with a little bit of water on it and a little bit of fog on it. And that if it was here for a reason, then there's a grand purpose to the universe at large, but it's not what you think it is.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for meeting with me.
Thank you. If you need anything else, you need any resources, let me know.
Sounds good. Thank you so
much.
Have a
good one. Yep.
You too.
Bye.
Why do you open 2 gigabytes?